This program was first broadcast on Canterbury's access media station, Plains FM, and was made with the assistance of New Zealand On Air.
Hi and welcome to Breaking Ground, a podcast about earth-moving machinery and people in our industry. I'm your host, Richard Clark, and I work for Terra, New Zealand's cat machinery dealer. In this podcast, we hear from a wide range of people in our industry, and today we welcome in Colin Mansbridge, the CEO of the Crusaders. Hello, Colin.
G'day, Richard. How are you?
Good, thank you. Terra been a key partner with the Crusaders since 2011. It's a long-term partnership that we're really proud of. And with Super Rugby Pacific season underway, we thought it was a great opportunity to talk to Colin about the Crusaders' culture, partnerships, business synergies, and some rugby, of course. So, Colin, to start with, tell us about your role as CEO of the Crusaders.
Yeah, interesting job, Richard. It's sort of, I don't know what I do, actually. My first couple of weeks in the organisation in 2018, I said to the operations manager there, I said, what does the CEO do around here? I wish I'd never asked that question because there seems to have been a whole lot of work dropped on my plate since then. But, it's a real privilege to lead an organisation like this. I think it runs itself. There's sort of ways that you can it's almost like heading dog style, I think. You get the opportunity to do some influencing things, but it's a pretty good organisation.
And I suppose it's 2025 now. Since you started in 2018, what's changed around the organisation over that time? Because that's, 7 years now?
Yeah, so probably the big thing, 2019, we obviously had the mosque attack in Christchurch, and that forced us to go through a little bit of an identity review. And so we express identity a little differently now than what we did before. We're still the same organisation that we were in the first 23, 24 years, but we just express it a little differently and probably tell a story that's more authentic now. That's probably the big thing. We've set up a women's elite team, Matatu.
Yes.
And Matatu is won its a championship 2 seasons ago. And we've got Matatu in place. Super Rugby Pacific's now independently governed, so there's a new competition format such that it's, we had COVID through that period.
Yes.
Out of COVID's come this new competition, which is a bit of the old, but with a very Pacific flavour, and it's really going off this year. So, very exciting.
Yeah, that's great to see, because I know that obviously through the COVID times we had Super Rugby Aotearoa, and then there's been various different versions of Super Rugby with, I think, South Africa, and, we had South America with the Argentinian team and team from Japan. So probably good to have a bit more, structure around a set competition now, in terms of it's quite similar to what it was last year, apart from one of the teams in Australia, the Rebels.
The Rebels, yeah. So I think the problem with footy, like all things, is sometimes it's trendy to expand. And so, some years ago, expansion was on the cards, and so the competition got very, very big. What we've found is that actually connection is probably more important than expansion. So if you get your core competency, from a business perspective, absolutely right, it makes you more effective when you start connecting with other competitions in other parts of the globe. And I think what we've realised is that travel and a whole lot of other commitments that were there pre-COVID have forced a tighter, leaner, meaner competition, and it's starting to deliver the goods now.
No, excellent. And I suppose if you compare it to a business environment with the Crusaders, from a strategic planning perspective, do the Crusaders work to like a 5-year plan or a 3-year plan, or is it season to season? Because I suppose from a fan's perspective, it's very much season to season, but I'm sure in the background that might be a little bit different. Is that the case, or is it a bit different to that?
The strategic planning is probably as complex and comprehensive as most businesses, probably not as detailed because it's a simpler business. But we'll take a 3 to 5 year view of what we perceive the environment will look like in 3 to 5 years, both in terms of overall sporting landscape, how the competition might evolve in response to that landscape, and then what does that mean for us as an organisation. So we're always thinking things like our academy structure. That's something that's been going since 2015 now.
Yes.
So an academy's with a view to build a roster that's going to be 80% internally developed, if possible, and sustain that year in, year out. Yes. So the decision about the establishment of an academy and to partner with Canterbury Rugby and with Tasman Rugby, very, very strategic decisions. Establishing a women's elite team, strategic decision, albeit that we're also campaign reviewing. I think a campaign's a little bit like an annual budget cycle. You you've got to perform annually as well as get the right strategy.
No, it definitely all makes sense. So we sort of talked about, to start with, that Super Rugby Pacific has started with a hiss and a roar. There seems to be a lot of renewed excitement about rugby this year. What do you put that down to?
So I think the competition itself is, about 3 or 4 years ago, we pushed the founding clubs in New Zealand and a couple of the Australian clubs, the Queensland Red in particular, pushed very hard our national unions to have this competition governed independently from the national unions. So If you think New Zealand Rugby is most interested in teams in black, and they achieve great teams in black by exceptional Super Rugby teams developing talent underneath.
Yes.
But they don't really, they're not really as invested in Super Rugby as what the clubs are. So we've pushed for this independent governance, and we've now got an independent CEO, Jack Messley, who's been in situ for just on 12 months now, and an independent board. And what that's done is it's forced alignment. So there's a lot better alignment in the competition now. So refereeing, if you look at refereeing in this year, you would think the referees are being directed or instructed by a competition or a fan-led focus, and it's manifesting on the field. Now,
yes, definitely seen that so far.
Whereas traditionally the refs were sitting there and you had a referee manager in New Zealand, a referee manager in Rugby Australia, or a referee manager for the Pacific Islands, and they are all reporting to World Rugby, who are trying to get referees appointed to internationals, Six Nations and World Cup matches. Well, what's happening now is they're following an instruction of a competition, and the competition's got a fan-first mindset. So we're seeing referees move the game along, more ball in play, more metres gained, more tries scored, more points scored, closer results, all resulting from this alignment. So we're all competing. There's no love lost between me and Andrew Hoare at the Blues, or Simon Graffis at the Chiefs, or Roger Clark down at the Highlanders. There's no love lost there. But collectively we know we need to work together for the benefit of the competition, which will benefit all of us.
Yeah, and it's definitely manifesting itself in a much more exciting competition that has got just that fan engagement. I know that amongst my friends, and there's people talking a lot more about it that maybe weren't doing so much over the last year or two. So that's great to see.
I think we struggle with the malaise of, when you get a change of government or new government and everybody's out bagging the government and everything they do is wrong. I think we went through that with rugby for a wee while. And now when you show how the game can be played and administered and governed and promoted, you realise, maybe we should be a bit grateful for what we've got here and enjoy it.
Oh, most definitely, yes. Now, the Crusaders missed the playoffs in 2024, challenging year for the club after, a sustained run of success. What lessons have been taken from 2024, I suppose maybe on the field and off the field, and how do you move forward with that?
So it's a good question, Richard. Transition is probably a lesson we learned through that period. Leading into 2024, we were aware, in fact, we promoted and pushed our previous head coach into the All Blacks job. We did our best to support him in his candidacy for that role. And we did our best to support all of his management team into candidacy for their roles. Our view is we're a development-led organisation, so the best compliment we can win is when our people get promoted or pushed on or developed. we probably pushed a bit too hard and we got cleaned out a bit. So it wasn't just the head coach. We got cleaned out in terms of staff into high performance roles in both the All Blacks, but more broadly across New Zealand rugby. And we lost a couple as well who'd been there for a long period of time. So that was a good thing. We were really stoked about people developing. I think when we had Plan A, Plan B, Plan C, Plan D, Plan E, which were transition plans, and we got to E and threw it out because we were, we were that far along. We had to play what was in front of us, and I think we probably didn't quite appreciate how substantial the transition was, and the new head coach and his management group, we probably set them up to continue what was going on before. But of course, they're new people, and there's a lot of new people. And one thing we've learned from that review was we had to give that group the keys to drive the car in their way and support them. And it's not that we weren't doing that before, but we probably weren't quite as overt about it. So they came along and thought that they were driving somebody else's car. Now we've said to them, well, no, it's your car. It's we just haven't made that clear enough to you and supported you to drive your car. And even the way the team's playing this year is different than the way they played last year and the year before. And so I'm proud of them for the picking up the mantle and getting on with it.
Yeah, I suppose there's quite good similarities or synergies with a business in terms of a new CEO coming on board. Maybe the people are the same around him, but there are some other changes from a structural perspective that may need to happen in terms of the personnel and that type of thing. And it's probably quite similar to what's happened with the Crusaders as well, isn't it? Yeah,
you've got to be careful, don't you? This organisation's got DNA. I can feel it, and in fact, the way that I try and operate inside it is to accept the DNA and celebrate it and enhance the DNA. So it does teach you how to behave as a Crusader, both on and off the field Crusader. Also, though, people have to be given the keys, sometimes. And when they're driving somebody else's car, it's not their car. That's a failure of it's a failure of mine. I probably could have done a better job in terms of that transition. So, and that manifests in maybe 30 or 40 small things that you sit down and you go, oh, Jeff, I just got, and there's lots of those aha reflective moments. So the review last year was an exceptional moment for us to sit down and go, those 30 or 40 things and a couple of mindset changes, and we're confident that'll positively impact the current group.
Oh, great to hear. Now, you talked about DNA, and the Crusaders are well known for their internal culture, and that dates right back to 1998 and their first title. Tell us more about that and how the culture has been instrumental in the Crusaders' success.
So it's interesting, Richard. When I arrived here, I got a bit of imposter syndrome because this culture carried with it a real weight of responsibility. And so, notwithstanding they won their first title in 98, probably a lot of the work, some of the work was done in 96, the forgotten crusade, as it's described.
Yes.
But in 97, Wayne Smith arrived, and there was a lot of work done around culture and values. And interestingly, we've just spent a wee bit of time on that again. So there's a set of team values that were developed in that time. And they carried on for a long period of time. We've had attempts to overwrite them with, we'll do a corporate workshop and get the board involved and we try and overwrite them, but we keep coming back to them. So the things that were important then, so we is one of those thematic things we talk about, the famous Muhammad Ali poem. How do you bring me to the organisation, and how do we show up in the organisation? And that in itself can give you hours and hours of fruitful reflection and labour. So team first, work ethic, lots of values that have, most people have held standards to around that for, 25, 26 years now. We're getting on to 30 years. So I think the other piece is people are all in. Willie Hines came back from his spell in England, and I remember doing some work with him. We were presenting to a group of people, and I asked him what did he like about the Crusaders, and he said, one thing I've noticed is that it doesn't matter who the person is in the place, they're all in.
Yes.
And I think we get that we get that a bit with our sponsors and partners and relationships, people are all in. That makes a difference. When everyone's all in, it makes it a lot easier to make progress.
Yes.
Fix stuff, do stuff, enhance stuff. All in definitely makes a difference.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose many of our listeners are business owners, and growing a positive team culture from a business perspective is really essential. So you talked about that all-in element. Is that something that others can learn about from that Crusaders in terms of how they've grown culture?
So I've got some experience, Richard, from outside of this business. I've been a banker for 30 plus years.
Yes.
And a lot of that time as a corporate banker, being able to go in and out of businesses and watch how they operate and understand them a little bit, assess them for credit. So you have a critical mindset about the way that people run their businesses. And what I've found is that this place, more than any other I've been in, is conscious about culture, and it sets time aside for culture. And it believes in leadership, and it sets time aside for leadership. So if that's one thing I would recommend anybody in business is, don't underestimate how valuable that work is. A lot of people would see it as soft. This is an organisation where most players go out most weeks at 100 kg plus, running into each other at faster than they've ever done before, more often than they've ever done before. So they're tough men, but they focus a lot of time, energy and effort on the soft skills, which are not really soft. They're tough skills, when you're talking about culture, when you're talking about leadership. So designing calendars that have time available to spend time on that is really, really important. And that's the thing that stands out for me more so than all of the other organisations I've seen or been involved in. They all tend to focus on, scheduling, staffing, manufacturing processes. They'll do all of the things,
yes,
but they won't do time, effort and energy on that sort of ethereal stuff, which is culture. So what are we going to do? What are our processes going to be? How are we going to make sure that people spend time connecting each day? What are we going to do about that stuff?
It's certainly really important. I remember probably 3 or 4 years ago attending a session with our apprentices, and it was one of I think it was your team manager, Fletch, at the time, or possibly Webby, who was the academy manager. He said, what's the most important thing about being part of an organisation? And some of those things that you talked about came out before, but the actual answer that they gave me and the rest of the group was belonging.
Yes.
And I think it's a thing that you don't really think about as an organisation when someone comes into that business or that organisation, is that sense of belonging and being a part of a bigger thing.
I think that's the thing that I've noticed people spend most of their time on. A few years ago, we did the corporate right thing and we got the rainbow tick. And I remember when we got the rainbow tick, somebody asked me, what did you spend all the time and effort on doing that for? And one of the reasons was Rainbow Tick came in and did an audit of us and said, we want to find out whether or not you've got the right policies and processes and procedures, but we also want to talk to all the people in your organisation and find out how safe they feel and do they feel like they belong. And we failed on the policies and processes.
Yes.
So what we weren't good at is documenting some of this stuff and, having it put aside and meeting all the policy requirements. What we're exceptional at, and they told us we were exceptional at, is probably the best example in anywhere they've been where people felt like they could be themselves and were loved and cared for as being themselves.
Yes.
And that there were conscious efforts to make people feel like they belong. And I think that's the thing, DEI is one of those dirty words at the moment, isn't it?
Sure is.
And especially in the US, it's a really dirty word. I think if you work on belonging and you work on everybody in the organisation makes people feel like they belong and they're making a contribution, you don't have to have all this other fancy policy out the side. It takes care of itself. But belonging, you've got to remind yourself that you've got to do it. How's that person going to feel when they turn up? Do they feel like they're going to be able to contribute, make a contribution, feel like that it's home for them, feel like when they leave the place that there's a bit of a hole in their heart? And I remember after COVID, we sort of said, right, look, we're going to get back into the office, but it's really important that you don't make too much of an effort to get in too close a proximity because there's still the virus going around. So we'll do this transition period. And if you want to take your time coming back into the office And so I thought I'd lead from the front and just meander back into the office at about 9 so as not to look too anxious and set a scene. I got into the office, there were people hugging and kissing and all the rules rang. But they were so desperate to be back to the place where they belong. And I think that's, belonging, you just cannot underestimate the power of belonging.
And another thing that sort of links into that culture and belonging element is recruitment as part of a process of an organisation. So for you guys as the Crusaders, is recruitment, is it a combination of the person and their skill set in terms of, that's similar to business, or are there other things that you're looking at as well?
I think there is also, we talk about character, but character's an often ill-used term, and it can sometimes be applied differently by different people in different contexts. So I think we look for people who do line up to the values, so have the capacities to show some work ethic, have the capacity to think about teamwork, have the capacity to think about me in the context of we, what do I bring and what does the team bring. Those sorts of things are quite important. But in the end, I think we're always trying to select people who are going to outgrow us. So if I think about we're trying to select All Blacks in our academy, we're not trying to select Crusaders.
Yes.
We're trying to select people who are capable of being an All Black. And then we do everything in our power to help them become an All Black. Now, in the process, we hope they become great Crusaders, and we hope that they play really well for Canterbury or for Tasman. But we start off thinking, can you be an All Black?
Yes.
And invariably, that's not necessarily just physical attributes, or it's some of those other aspects. So, some great players have failed to become All Blacks. Some players who might not be as physically well endowed as others have become great All Blacks. So I think it's having ambition for the person, seeing in them the capacity to go all the way, and then believing in them and doing your best to serve them to get there. Now, serving them is not necessarily being servile. Serving them can be, demanding of them high standards, demanding of them that they demand those standards of themselves. But it is serving them to help them achieve that goal of being, too good for you. So
Yes.
so we lose them.
Yeah, well, I was just about to go into my next question was around retention, because, trying to keep the people that are critical both on the field and off the field, because, I suppose as in business, from a sporting organisation, there's a lot of opportunities out there, and you are looking to grow them and potentially, move them on to whether it's All Blacks or offshore or something. Tell us a bit about that from a Crusaders perspective with the retention element, because it can be pretty challenging.
I think, and that's one thing we do struggle with, Richard. So we do struggle to retain people when it's time for them to kick on and do what's best for them. I think the underlying strategy of belonging, or that piece that you've learned from either Fletch or Webby about belonging, I think that permeates through the whole organisation. So what you do is you make the place a place where people want to belong and they feel like they belong. That makes it really, really hard for them not to move on to somewhere else, because they're terrified of losing that sense of tūranga waiwai, my place, the place that I can survive and be and thrive. Once you've done that, then the reason that they will move on, generally speaking, is for a better opportunity. So you're not, and the better opportunity is one that we should be proud to support. So to become an All Black and to help somebody be an All Black coach, for example, we should be proud of that, because that's part of our purpose. Now, what we want to do is make them feel a pang of regret when they go and leave a bit of a hole in their heart. So that's what we do. I think we try and create some holes in the heart,
Yes.
at the same time as making sure that we do everything we can to push them into those other opportunities.
No, some interesting insights there. Thanks for that. So it's not just about the on-field success. Tell us about, from a Crusaders perspective, with fan engagement and brand growth that you guys have focused on more recently.
Yes, I think the 2019 brand or identity review was a step helping us to understand a little bit about who we are, where we come from, and how we appeal to fans. shortly after that, we developed this foundation, the Crusade with Heart Foundation, and it surprised us how well that's landed in our local community. So that's something where what we do is we partner with other organisations to support great causes. So be that Child Cancer Foundation in the long run, the Youth Hub in Christchurch, where we support them through raising money through our Hall of Fame. And what it does is it gives us a chance to use our assets, our reputation and our brand to raise money for them. So we don't sit in the middle and collect it. We just make sure it goes directly to them, and we just use our assets. What that does is it gives us a really good opportunity. Players love participating in a cause that's bigger than themselves. Well, so do we all, don't we? Of course. The sponsors do as well. So if we're participating in a cause that's bigger than yourself, it really does an exceptional job of engaging the community. So our community engagement, where of all the super clubs in New Zealand, the research we've had over some years is that we are the most well-loved in our own region. And we're the second most respected in most other regions. Respected rather than loved. I'm sure we're pretty unloved.
There's a little bit of a distinction between the two. So,
but the other piece is we did some research with the New Zealand Rugby Commercial middle of last year, and what was a surprise to us was by trying to be good in our region and growing our brand, we've appealed quite strongly to overseas markets. So 80% of our fans, by number, don't reside in the Crusaders region, they reside overseas. So when we went to Munster and played in Cork, we sort of thought, we'll turn up there and see what it looks like. Well, we sold out a 44,000-seat stadium in hours, in a day,
yes.
And a great event. And I think that shows the power of the brand, not only in the region, but also internationally as well.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about the community engagement, that's very much a key element that a lot of businesses try to connect with, but it's not always the easiest to do that, depending on what sort of industry you might be in, that the local community might not align so much with that. But I know from a perspective of being a Crusaders partner, we've really enjoyed being involved with some of those community engagement elements that the Crusaders have put on. And I suppose linking into that commercially with your business partners like Terra and Terra's been a Crusaders partner, we're probably one of the longer ones now since 2011. Yeah. What do you look for with business partnerships at the Crusaders?
I think if you go back 25 years, it was mainly, can you give us a little bit of money, and in exchange we will make sure that we will get your brand out on TV and into the community. I think that relationship's evolved much more now, and it's interesting. Terra's an interesting partner. I think we spend more time talking leadership and culture with Terra than we talk about reach and engagement. Now, that's not true. I'm sure Doug and his team will say to me, Colin, don't be an idiot. We spend a lot of time talking about how we help them grow their brand, reach and engagement. But a lot of what we talk about now, and I think about Chris, and the whole time I've seen him in this organisation from before he was CEO to now he's CEO.
Yes, so this is Chris Heaton, who's our CEO, yes.
We spend all our time talking about leadership and culture, and he'll talk to me about things he can do to be a better leader, and I talk to him about things I can do to be a better leader. And so we spend more time talking about that stuff than we talk about, the dollars and cents or that relationship. And I think that's what I've noticed through a lot of our partners now, is that the relationship's evolved, and it's how can we help you be successful through whatever means is possible, and then how do you help us be successful through whatever means is possible. And there's a lot more of a values alignment. So we don't go and look at Terra's values and then look at ours and tick them off and say, yeah, they align. You do that through getting to know each other and working with each other. And that's why the relationship's been around for so long, and long may it continue.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's changed significantly from, I was involved back in 2011, and it's like night and day in terms of what we're doing now as compared to back then. Some of those elements are still the same.
Yes.
But there's so much more growth that's been added into it, and it's really expanded upon in terms of some of the things that we can do, both from a community and a business perspective, but also what we're doing with the Crusaders as well. So, now I wanted to talk. We're just down the road from the new Christchurch Stadium, One New Zealand Stadium. How much are you looking forward to having the Crusaders play there in 2026, which is not far away, really. We're talking April next year, first game. How good's it going to be?
Well, it's months rather than years now, isn't it, Richard?
Yes.
And I think I've just been talking to the board recently, our board, about, going into the new stadium and what does that look like, and the relationship with Venues Ōtautahi, which has been very, very positive. And we were recapping on how long it's taken us to get here from the recovery plan work, and then council in 2018 and government in 2018, all the way to developing this special purpose vehicle to build the thing, and now getting it built, and all of the work with the community through that piece. And you've got to remind yourself how much work's gone in to get to where we are today. I haven't actually had the opportunity to be inside the venue yet in its current form. I know some of our partners have been inside. I know some of our staff and some of our coaches have been inside to have a look at how it might work. But I personally haven't had the chance. And the couple of opportunities that I might have liked to have gone, it's been more important that somebody else has gone. So I'm sitting there and they come back and they tell me how wonderful it looks, and I can't wait to get in there to have a look. But from all the pictures, all the feedback from the staff, all the feedback from the contractors, the partners, everybody who's been in there just raves about it, and they can feel it now. They can actually, you go in and close your eyes. Well, you shouldn't, because there'd be health and safety risks. But if you went in now, you could probably feel what it's going to look like. And we're quivering with anticipation is probably the way I describe it, Richard.
Yeah, it's going to be a game changer for the city, and it'll certainly be fantastic for the Crusaders in terms of having a new fortress to set themselves up, as has been set in Addington since 2012.
Well, I think Venues Ōtautahi have done an exceptional job of getting other events to Addington. And they've worked really hard on concerts and bands and other sporting events there. That this just gives them so much more capacity to do other events. So we're really, we feel really privileged to be able to play there. I think a lot of people see us as synonymous with the venue, but it also gives the city the opportunity to host concerts, host other sporting events, host other events. And, there'll be hundreds of events a year there. And I think it's going to be awesome for Christchurch. You only have to look when you walk past it. It's just, I think people that walk down the street look up at it and go, wow, it's nearly here. It's nearly open, don't they?
Oh, I mean, I'm in the city every couple of weeks, and there always seems to be something new that has been developed on it in that short period of time there. So, the countdown's on. It's going to be very exciting. Now, looking further afield, we've got Rugby World Cup in the US in 2031, a World Club Challenge on the horizon as well, and Crusaders hopefully involved there. Do you see some opportunities across both sport and commercially with those key things that are coming up?
Absolutely, Richard. We, as I said, last year, pre-season, we went to the Northern Hemisphere and we played in Munster and Bristol, played 2 exhibition matches there, and we were well received and the brand was well recognised in both those areas. We've talked to some Irish clubs about potentially doing something similar pre-season in the US. So we've explored that, and the All Blacks obviously are going up there again to play Ireland.
That's right.
And so you can see that there's actually a very strong Ireland-New Zealand link, and the US is an obvious place to explore that link. So we've explored with some Irish clubs about the potential to play matches there. We do pre-season in a place like the US is a bit of a no-brainer for us. We've been talking to a number of MLR clubs about relationships there.
Yes.
World Club Cup, which will be 2028, all things going to plan, will be an opportunity. So 1 year after the Rugby World Cup in Australia, that'll give us a real opportunity to broaden the game, club game, across more than Europe and more than New Zealand. So we're excited by that opportunity, and I think there's an opportunity to start thinking about how do we connect with MLR or other competitions into the US. It's not about Super Rugby expanding in an ill-disciplined fashion or expanding for expansion's sake. But again, if you've got your core competition right, what are the connections that you can have with Japan? What are the connections you can have with the US? And those things are all on the Super Rugby Pacific radar, which allied with us doing our own work into those areas, I see that 80-20, ironically 80-20 connection, 80 being offshore, just growing in markets like the US.
Oh, it's going to be very exciting. That's for sure. So, and aligning with the new stadium and everything around that, good time to be involved from a Crusaders perspective for the next few years. So pre-Crusaders, you mentioned before about commercial banking background. Can you give us an insight into your upbringing and your business background in that space?
Yeah, so I spent a lot of time with two banks in New Zealand, and from university. I had a checkered university history. Had to have a couple of goes at it. Finally got myself a commerce degree, and then
you wouldn't be the first. Yeah, so
then a bit of graduate study in risk management, but then time offshore, and then Southeast Asia, so London, UK, and Europe. I worked for the financial services regulator there. Back to New Zealand, back offshore to Japan, then Southeast Asia, spent some time in Vietnam, and then back to Australia, Sydney, and then Brisbane. And I worked for ANZ in Brisbane, running Queensland business for ANZ for a few years, and then back to New Zealand and working for BNZ in the agribusiness sector, looking after that sector for New Zealand out of Christchurch here. So my background's traditionally been in commercial banking. The thing I loved about commercial banking was that you got to meet, especially when you're in corporate, not in a specialist segment, you got to meet people from different industries, and you never got expert in their industry because they were always expert, but you're always an investor in their industry, a co-investor with them. So you needed to understand it, and so it gave you this amazing breadth of understanding and insight into strategy. So I think that, bankers are a little bit like consultants. Commercial bankers are a bit like consultants. It's an education you can never overlook the value of it. So I think that set me up well in this job. Large people leadership roles. I think I learned a lot from being a Crusaders fan, and I used to take those into my previous roles.
Yes.
But I wish I'd known what I know now. I would have been a better leader back in business if I'd known what I know now.
And in terms of mentors in business, is there anyone in particular, or what have you learnt specifically from someone, maybe going back into that, background in that banking industry that you've had?
There are lots of people who have provided me advice, support, and encouragement, be that peers or direct reports even, or even managers through that process. One particular circumstance I remember, there's a guy called Louis Hawke. I think he might still be on the BNZ board. If he's not, he's on the National Australia Bank board, and he worked for the bank that I was employed at, and I'd just been appointed, or just about to be appointed to a new role. And he talked to me, asked me to describe what I believe a leader is about, and what was my leadership philosophy. Yes. And this role was quite a big role, quite a big people leadership role, and I hadn't given it much thought. I'd arrived there by accident. And so I described back to him what I thought was important. He said, we call that servant leadership. And you need to go and read this book by Robert Greenleaf called The Servant Leader, and then you need to go off and do all this other reading to understand who you are a bit better. And so it was the first time I'd really done that work, even though I sort of innately believed that's what was required.
Yes.
And that was a bit of a life changer for me, because I understood a little bit what people were doing and why they were doing it. So Simon Sinek, the Golden Circle champion, and I was probably one of his earliest readers or observers of him. And he hadn't even done less than 1 million views on YouTube when I looked at it first. I think because of the encouragement from Louis. So there's others that have had similar sort of impacts, getting me to think and reflect.
Yes.
But that was a moment which made me think about what's leadership all about to me.
Oh, thanks for that insight. That's really interesting. So at Terra, we have Crusaders players and managers. They come in and speak to our new apprentice class every year. And they talk about stepping up and dealing with new responsibilities. They're obviously in quite a new environment with that. And it's always an absolute highlight to be part of that and see their brains ticking over in terms of what they're learning essentially on the job as that session's happening. What advice would you give to young people who are dealing with new challenges and needing to perform under pressure in life or in business and in sport? And I suppose, the apprentice class at Terra and the academy class at the Crusaders, there's a lot of alignment there. Is there anything that you'd sort of maybe give them in terms of advice there?
I think everybody, Richard, starts off with a certain level of imposter syndrome, right? So even if you've been selected for a team or you've been anointed to an academy or selected into a role, invariably you go in with a little bit of trepidation, a little bit of fear, and that's natural. What it'll do, of course, sometimes is that fear to fit in, to belong, can sometimes manifest in a bit of emotional energy that's not necessarily helpful. The amygdala gets turned on and acts a little bit more. And so really what you want to be doing is to be breathing and thinking more than feeling. So most people are going to be emotionally challenged and the feelings are going to be up. And so the thing I would suggest is how can you breathe? How can you breathe your way out of these moments of stress? And how can you almost turn on the meta-me? So if you think about if you could put a little person on your shoulder who is you, your brain, you,
yes.
And you could get them to sit on your shoulder and look inside you and ask you questions about what are you feeling at the moment? What are you thinking at the moment? What are other people feeling? What are they thinking? Why are they like that? Even being rational like that and asking yourself those questions gives you the opportunity to step aside and breathe and take a moment. And that'll diminish those high anxiety moments. And I think even when you go away, you sit in the corner at home rocking because you're thinking, what have I done?
Yes.
It gives you that opportunity to stop, breathe and reflect and think and get the thinking muscles going rather than the feeling muscles.
It's definitely some good advice. So, last question. So you've been on board with the Crusaders since 2018. So over the last 7 years, there's a lot of standout moments. What's been a couple of highlights for you, whether they be on the field or off the field?
Probably the ones that really I get most emotionally affected by are when players get inducted or they win a debut. So they play their first game. And invariably in a shed, and it happens now with Matatu as well, but invariably in the Crusaders environment, I've often got the privilege of sitting in the shed. And so what will happen is somebody will play their first game and somebody else will get up. Normally there's an agreement amongst the team, and it might be an experienced player will get up and they'll describe what they've seen in terms of work ethic, in terms of commitment and investment in time of the debutant to get to play their debut. And so they'll go through a process of telling their story and how they feel about that person and how much they admire that person. So, really making them feel like they belong. And so then they hand over a small trophy. The person gets their debut trophy. And then everyone in the team roars, applauds and roars, and the roars go on and on forever, and they don't stop. And some of the stories you hear, both from the players receiving their debut award and from the players telling the story about them, that they'll last with me for the rest of my life. They're private stories, but they're really, really special. And so I love seeing debuts. I think they're the most special thing you can see. Yeah,
that's very interesting because from, I suppose, the rugby public's perspective, you see the 50-game player run out or the person who's done 100 games and they receive some sort of commemoration as that. But I suppose from the rugby public's perspective, you don't see that debut element. And like you said before, it's very private and it's the team, we, me element that really manifests itself in that. So really, really interesting to hear that. Well, thank you, Colin. We've come to the end of our time here today. Thank you very much for coming on Breaking Ground. It's been great chatting with you.
Thank you, Richard. I think, the relationship with Terra is one of the coolest partnerships one could have. As you've said, it's a long, long-standing one. but it's more than just a partnership. It's we're whānau, aren't we?
Most definitely.
We feel like we're in each other's family, and that's what true partnership's all about.
Yeah, thank you for that. To our listeners, we hope you've enjoyed today's conversation with Colin. You can check out all our episodes of Breaking Ground on our Terra YouTube channel. Or if you want to engage directly with us, send us a message on any of our Terra social media channels. Thanks and goodbye. We'll catch you next time on Breaking Ground.